Hi class, here is the module on test taking for strategies for academic success. And I know you've already had one big exam, but you can use that as a model and we'll reflect on some best practices in this module. But if you haven't already noticed, I really like the power process ideas in Dave Ellis's textbook. So let's look at the one for chapter 6. Detach. So here's an idea that can really be useful in many different areas of your life, but it can also help you as a student. So when you are able to release things that are keeping you back, you can release that natural learner inside you. So consider the idea that attachments are addictions. And when you feel this strong pull, strong emotions, strong situations, it may be time to detach. So this always is easier said than done. But it really is a practice of noticing your thoughts and physical sensations, practicing relaxation, and practice seeing events in a broader perspective. Giving up an attachment doesn't mean giving up on the goal. It really does mean to give up something that is not useful to you. So see that image of the balloons in front of you? Really imagine what things would you like to let go of? Like, what would you put on the orange balloon? Like, I'd like to let go of anger. Personally, that's something that's true of me. What would you like to let go of? Put it on the balloon. So think about situations where you could detach and how you could stop hanging on to old things. And I'm going to remind you of something that I brought up in the last module. And there are two informal mindfulness techniques. One is called stop, one is called rain. What are they? How might you use those in this situation? So now we're going to talk about some test-taking tips, and I'm going to talk about a before, during, and after process, and hopefully introduce some new ideas. So what do you do before a test? Do you manage your review time? Do you plan out doing short daily reviews, weekly reviews, and major reviews? Do you create study checklists, mind map summaries, and flashcards? These are all really powerful tools. I want to suggest to you that I think even if you might be spending 2 to 5 hours at a time in the best of all possible situations, my recommendation is actually to break that up and not study for more than 30 minutes at a time, because you need to move your body around and be in a different situation. So I would recommend that. Also, you're going to see that I really think mind map summaries are kind of the best study technique when you have a major exam. So consider using those. You might see something coming forward as another way to use them. So what do you do before the test? Do you have a section of your notebook labeled test questions? It would be a good idea to do that. It's also a good idea to ask your instructor what the test is going to be like ahead of time. Now, I posted instructions on the last exam beforehand and then posted questions, and some people didn't. I'm not sure if everyone read that. So take it upon yourself to thoroughly investigate as much as you can before. I want to suggest to you that there's some other great ideas. One would be, if you can't study with a group, at least talk out loud to yourself. And then finally, this idea of visualizing yourself at the computer or in the classroom, having a calm and deliberate finish to the test. Don't poo-poo the idea of visualization. It could really help you, and so could any kind of relaxation practice. So here are some ideas for what to do right at the beginning of an exam. So I'm going to be making some comments that are related to both online experiences and face-to-face exams. But first, if you're in a face-to-face exam, arrive early, but not too early to get caught up in everyone's anxiety. In both situations, do a little relaxation exercise. If you are in a face-to-face class, pay attention to the directions that you're being given, but do the same if you're in an online exam and read the instructions carefully. Scan the whole test before you start. Really take advantage of this. Evaluate the importance of each section. How much time should you spend on each question? Read the instructions carefully. This is the number one way that students miss points, is by not reading instructions carefully. You can't spend unlimited time on 1-point questions. Sometimes you have to let those go. If you're in a face-to-face exam, ask if you can write on the exam if you need to jot things down, because that can help you sometimes, or if you can write on scratch paper. So this is all about your attitude of beginning when you take tests. So here's some more psychological tips for test taking. You want to answer the easiest, shortest questions first. So if you are allowed to skip around on an exam, sometimes you're not. If you're given a computer adaptive testing technique, you might actually be forced to answer something before you can move on. But if you can skip around, then do the easiest things first and pace yourself. Look for answers in other test questions. And again, say I have this other reminder that careful reading is your number one key to success. It's not just about how much you've prepared. It's how well you are on game day. So test taking, whether you're taking it online or whether you're taking it face-to-face, is a little bit like a game, and you have to be prepared to pay attention. So true-false questions, I want you to think about this logically. The big idea of true-false questions is that in order for something to be true, it has to be 100% true. So when you look at something, you say, well, it's kind of true, it's kind of not true. You should say it's false. So this is, again, a lesson in reading carefully, answering quickly, looking for qualifiers, usually, normally, sometimes if. And then whenever you see something that's an absolute qualifier, become a little suspicious. So if you see an always, a never, a no, a not, an all, those are indications that something is either always true or always false. And that's actually quite difficult to prove. So when you see an absolute qualifier in a question, I want you to circle it and take pause. Multiple choice questions are probably the most frequent question type in a test. So first you want to check the directions to see if it's possible to circle more than one answer, because you never know. Sometimes there are test-taking situations like that. You want to answer the questions in your head before looking at the answer choices. That's another technique your book recommends. And I really want to encourage all of you to read all of the answers before selecting one. So read through everything. Don't just read B. Sometimes you get to a question, you say, oh, I know it's B. And then you don't read C or D. Maybe C or D are better answers. You don't know. So first read carefully, but realize your first instinct is usually the best, and you don't want to over-interpret results on test taking. So multiple choice questions, the first part of the question is called the stem. It's usually an incomplete sentence, but not always. And then the A, B, and C are the options. And one way to look at multiple choice questions, especially when they get really tricky, is to pair the stem with the options and treat each one as a separate true-false and see if it follows the litmus test. Is this 100% true? The answer to the stem, which is clearly true, is usually the correct answer, but not always, especially if you have a not in the stem of the question. So let's try an experiment. I'm going to mention something next. It's called the nonsense test, and I want you to print off this test and take it and stop the video. So have you printed off the nonsense test yet? So I want you to do that. There are 6 multiple choice questions, and write down what you think the answer should be. Pause this video and then start it up again. So look at all the answers here. I've given you the correct answers for each one of the questions, 6 questions on the nonsense test. And I've actually also given you a rule that's generated from each one of the questions. So look at that carefully. D is the best answer in question 1, because in D, you're asked a question about some normal conditions. And D is really the best one because it indicates a kind of if-then principle. In number 2, I bet most people get this one right because you kind of internalize the rules of grammar. I really like question 3 because if you'll notice in the stem of the question, it's asking you for more than one cause, the probable causes. So A is the only one that gives you the answer of a possibility of more than one cause. There's an and. In 4, this is probably the weakest one, but it has the word plus in it. And 5, I want you to notice that A, B, and D are all absolute qualifiers, so they are not correct. And 6, B, find answers elsewhere on the test. Classic rule. So short answer questions or fill in the blank questions, really you need to get right to the point and concentrate on keywords and facts. You need to be brief but answer all parts of the question. And that is really the key. You have to determine what the question is asking you. The same is true on an essay question. You have to find out precisely what the question is asking you. Now, if you have it ahead of time, you have a lot of advantages. You can get ready. But if you're given it in class, you want to get right to the point and put your strongest ideas first in an essay. So this is an old school technique. It's called IBEC, which stands for Introduction, Body, Explanation, and Conclusion. So use that method when you're doing an essay. It's also helpful to write clearly and use only one side of the paper. So turn to page 188. I want you to look at these list of words because you might see them in an essay question, you might see them in short answer, and there's some different nuances here, and they get at differences in meaning to questions. So I think this list is really helpful when you're trying to unpack what the question is asking you. And be aware that compare-contrast is both what is similar and different. So also notice what the book says about what to do after a test. You really have an opportunity to gain the most when you look at your mistakes. Were your test errors because you didn't study the right thing? Was it because you were in a rush and were careless? Or did you have a concept error? And a concept error is more serious. It means that you didn't understand something. Some of you might have application errors where you have an understanding of the definition, but you don't give a correct answer. And then there's always those situations that are quite frustrating when you actually mess up on the test mechanics. So there are some solutions to all of these errors. You can practice test questions, read more carefully, and I want to suggest to you that's the #1 defense is reading carefully. When you don't understand something, you look for patterns, but you really do need to talk to your instructor or go to tutoring or try something different if you are not understanding the material. And also, the other thing that I'd like you all to consider is you probably need to build in time to proofread your test. So don't take it up to the last minute. Leave yourself 5 to 10 minutes to proofread an exam before you click submit or turn the paper in.